I think this is some people who may think that they were involved in this with some of the companies. They should really listen to this question, and that is, how does, I'm going to call it the scam because it is a scam. How does it actually work? How are investors being misled? Where's the real money being made at their expense?
Right. So the overall answer to your question is it's complicated. So I'm going to try and boil it down the best way I can. So you call, let's say I have $250,000 in my IRA, and I call and I get qualified. They qualify you, right? They make it sound prestigious. I'm going to qualify you, and you.
Yeah.
So they have this air of prestige. We're the premier gold company, and so on, which you know and I know that it just doesn't exist, right? You get levels of service, different businesses as you would any other business. And so they give this aura of prestige. They qualify you. So you'll call in and you'll talk to what's called a junior sales account executive, or a junior AE is what we call them, account executive. They would pre-qualify you, and they'd be working directly under a senior account executive who is like the good salesman. The junior's learning from the senior. So you have this dynamic. Now the junior will earn part of the commission that the senior earns if they're able to sell you these exclusive premium coins. So you call and you probably want gold American Eagles or gold Canadian Maple Leafs, Krugerrands, whatever it may be. You would just want common bullion that you've heard Andy or whoever talk about, and you're just looking to invest. So they'll go through the entire sales process, Andy, that you're probably familiar with, right? They'll get the funding through the custodian. They'll make sure that the funds are with the custodian and so on. And then what they'll do is they'll tell the person, hey, we'll sell you your gold Eagles, this is our price. And they go, okay. So then the customer will then initiate the transaction with the custodian to send the funding to Augusta. And then what will happen is they will get a call from the salesman and say, hey, I want to tell you about this other coin that I think is better for you in your portfolio. I think this coin is going to be a lot better for you. It performs better over time, and so on and so on and so on. And then they start hyping up this coin, and then the customer might be a little skeptical. And this is where the car dealership method comes in, that I was talking about earlier, where they will wear you down over time. They will talk to you for hours and hours and hours. And in one instance, what I witnessed was absolutely crazy in hindsight. A client was not on board at all. They did not want the coin. And what they would call these people, by the way, it was a derogatory term that they would use, is a bully head, bully. So if you weren't interested at all in the premium coin, they would call you a bully head. So if someone placed a trade and the person, the salesman called me, for example, and we were talking about a specific customer, if that customer would not buy these coins that they wanted to sell them, that they'd make all the commission off of, they would be like, oh yeah, he's a bully head, just sell him whatever and move on. So you'd call in and they'd wear you down over time. Now, you have to remember that at the time, Augusta were paying 0% commission on the American Eagles and Krugerrands and any bullion products, but selling, at one point, our commission was 15% on the exclusive premium coins. So if I'm a salesman, the only incentive I have to sell you anything is to sell you the exclusive premium coins. I have zero incentive to sell you the bullion. And in fact, this became such a contentious problem because when they couldn't flip, what they would call flip someone, right? It's like a bait and switch. You couldn't flip them into the premium coins. The salesman would be pissed. They'd go to Isaac and they'd say, hey, this is $500,000. I worked on this client for 3 days and I just couldn't get him to flip, blah, blah, blah. So we actually ended up at one point starting to pay like a percent or 1.5% on bullion. And so there was a direct incentive, but even still, I mean, you're talking 15% versus 1%, and that's without bonuses. There were commission structured bonuses. So if you had earned $5,000, so not sold $5,000 in product, but if you had earned $5,000 in commission, you had a small bonus like $250, and then 10,000 you'd get 500, 20,000 you'd get like a $5,000 bonus. It was crazy. Like the incentive structure was completely centered around these coins. So a lot of people, and I'm sure you've witnessed this, like with that gentleman that you were talking about earlier, they when I'm talking to them, they say, I'm so embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. And I've seen many highly intelligent people, like people with PhDs that were swindled. And a lot of this is because it's a big con game. It is a massive con game. I mean, these guys are the best at what they do. They could sell you your shoes. They could take your shoes off your feet and sell them to you, and then make you thank them for the privilege of doing it. I mean, they're really good. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And so I hear a lot of people when I talk about this, well, how dumb do you have to be and so on? It's not that. It's so much more than that. These people build trust and then they exploit the trust. And then there's the influencer side of it that comes into this too, where you have a large portion of the conservative influencers out there who are also building trust with their viewers and then exploiting that trust by advertising for companies that do this as well. So you have this massive dynamic, right? And like, this does not exist in a vacuum. These things are all intentionally set up to build trust and then exploit that trust when the time comes to execute the transaction. So like I said, it's very complicated, but in a nutshell, that's overall how it works. And I would just like to touch on one thing that you mentioned earlier about the mints, because you brought up the mints, and this is a very good point. So in I believe it was 2020, I sent a letter to the Royal Canadian Mint, and I sent a list of all the coins at that time that were being used in this exploitative way. And I got crickets, and they are still continuing to enter into these contracts to this day, because the Royal Canadian Mint, while it is a state mint, they are also allowed to execute private contracts as long as they're fulfilling their fiduciary duties to the government. So the way that works, if you don't mind, is I want to have an exclusive coin. So then I call a distributor. There's a specific distributor that everyone likes to use. And they call the distributor and they say, hey, I want to get a coin. And you prepay a certain amount of the premium. So if I want 250,000 coins, we paid $750,000 up front to get that premium coin. So we paid the premium up front to the distributor, who then obviously passed along the mint's portion to the mint. And then the way that the Royal Canadian Mint do it is they cannot mint any coins that cannot be distributed in Canada. So what they do is they mint the coins, and they mint like a small batch for Canada, like maybe 5,000 coins that they sell on their website or whatever and make available to the public in Canada. But then what they do with the United States market is they say, hey, you, Augusta Precious Metals, have the exclusive distribution rights to this coin in the United States. So no one else can enter into the primary market for that coin. Only Augusta can sell, for example, the Silver Canadian half-ounce bald eagle, which is one of the first coin that I had helped broker for them with the distributor. And now you might say, well, why would they do a Silver Canadian Eagle? Well, they do a Silver Canadian Eagle because people who want to call and buy a Silver American Eagle, it's a very easy sell to say, oh, we have the Silver Canadian Eagle. It's a much nicer coin. It looks a lot nicer, whatever it may be. And so then Augusta, having that primary market and the sole ability to sell that coin in the US market, has control over two things: supply and demand. And as you know, Andy, the two major things in any economy are supply and demand. That's what controls pricing. So if I control the supply and I limit mintage to 250,000 coins, for example, and then I'm talking to my clients on the phone and I'm telling them, hey, we're only minting 250,000 of these, and this is also part of the reason why these coins are so expensive, then the client, understanding those two basic economic principles, will go, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And they call them exclusive, premium, they hype them up, all that kind of stuff as well along the way. And so then they use the fractional denomination, that, as you also touched on, which is to further confuse folks, because it's really hard for folks to do quick math on the phone when you're working in half-ounce denominations or quarter ounce or 1.5 ounce. They do those too, 1.25 ounce, right? So they use these fractional denominations to further confuse folks when they're talking about the price on the phone. And in fact, it's actually pretty complicated because, as you know, when you're doing these analysis for folks who have been scammed, the first thing that I do, and I actually developed a calculator on my website to do this for folks at dalewhitaker.com, just a short plug. But if you go to dalewhitaker.com, there's a calculator on there that you can use to see if you've been swindled. And what that calculator does is it basically converts everything to 1 ounce denominations so that we have a linear playing field. So we can say, okay, if you had bought 1 ounce bullion coins at the same time, assuming a 10% premium, which is somewhat high sometimes, but just assume a 10% premium, this is how many more ounces you could have purchased had you not have purchased these other coins. So we do this conversion to get everything on a level playing field. And it's amazing how much value is lost just in that. And, folks, like you said, the folks don't realize it, and part of that is because these guys will tell them, you need to hold on to these assets for 5 to 10 years in order for you to see a result. It was like, well, no crap. Of course you have to, because you guys took 50% of my value off the top.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd like to mention, just pull on a couple strings. You talk about, they call them premium coins. So we have a very robust relationship with the Royal Canadian Mint, and we have storage facilities in Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal for the last 15 years. And I've been to the RCM, and we have many RCM uh, business associates that we call almost borderline friends. And along the way, we built a 2-ounce coin on the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Right, we designed it. Same thing that you're talking about, and we sell them for less than the silver maple leaf. We don't call it a premier coin just because we control it and control the spot. Actually, the supply and the demand. We want people to have a better deal on it, and so we are able to sell it for less than the regular maple leaf, because one of the things that's important for people to understand is that demand really on any of these oddball coins, and one of the things the Royal Canadian Mint will not let you do is to do something that is what you can't make your own silver maple leaf with a different design on it. It has to be something completely different. The point of it is that when these people call us and say, yeah, I got these half-ounce Canadian bald eagles, what's it worth? It's never going to be worth for any other dealer in the United States more than 99% of melt value, because there is no demand for that stuff anywhere. They create an artificial synthetic demand. So if I were to buy $1 million worth of those from someone who was defrauded, help them get out of it, they would sit on my shelf collecting dust. No one's going to buy them. And so it's the cost of carry. So we just melt them down and do whatever with them. Point of it is, they are not premier at all, and in fact are anything but that. I'm glad that you explained that. That's a big deal. People should understand that.